Despite the nature of the series, even when it was coming to its conclusion, I still hold it in high regard in my heart, as it was the very first manga I had ever actually read. It was the summer of 2004, and a friend of mine who I was riding in the car with had said, "Hey, do you like anime?" I had never even heard the word anime at this point, but once he described it, I'm just like, yeah, I love anime. And then he just hands me the very first volume of Bleach, and I start reading. And I just keep reading through it. I'm addicted to that first volume. It's so fascinating. The story of a Shinigami or a Grim Reaper, or whatever you want to call it, needing the help of this young boy who can see spirits, having no choice but to imbue him with her power in order to fight back against this vile evil spirit, in order for him to save his family because they can see spirits. And he ends up taking more power than she was actually trying to give to him, making it so that she's powerless and he has all the power he could possibly want to wield. And it ends up being this great start to this amazing Yu Yu Hakusho-esque concept, because I was big into Yu Yu Hakusho, but once I read Bleach, I'm just like, okay, dude, this is like the next step in terms of like telling that story. Like, whereas with Yusuke, he was just one guy on one case, well, case to case, dealing with all this stuff, but it's just like, no, now there's a whole organization of people along those lines, and I was fascinated by that concept. As he would fight Hollow after Hollow, who had these weird abilities and these odd quirks and these interesting situations, and the Quincy Uryu and their history with Soul Reapers or Shinigami, and their bitter rivalry and how they ultimately had to come together to some extent. And Chad, oh man, I loved when Chad eventually got his ability. That was so wicked to see him just bust out that right arm and just boom, take down the enemy. And even when Orihime unleashed her power, I thought, whoa, that was fantastic. It's a long range ability. You know, Chad has short range, Orihime has long range, and I was so blown away with her first defeat of a Hollow. It was so cool. I kept thinking, oh man, more and more of Ichigo's friends are going to gain powers because of their vicinity to him. Ichigo just has so much power that he starts to unlock abilities in all of his other friends, and he would just continue to see more and more of his friends gain abilities and powers. But then enter in Renji Abarai and Byakuya Kuchiki, and they've come for Rukia because of what she's done. She says apparently she's unleashed chaos upon the mortal world because she gave her powers to Ichigo, and it's created this incident that she has to be held accountable for. And Ichigo suffers this massive defeat at the hands of Byakuya after just barely managing to kind of get one over on Renji. Byakuya just stops him in an instant, and it's just like, you ain't even shit compared to this guy. And so he has to train with Yusuke Urahara in order to like train up and eventually go and save Rukia, but he has to undergo all this dangerous crap in order to do so. And he has to find the inner Shinigami that he should have to begin with and avoid becoming a Hollow. And it's just like this dangerous experimental method. And it's just like, is Urahara mad? What agenda does he have? And who is this talking cat Yoroichi? What's going on? Man, the start of Bleach was so hype. And I love the anime too, because, oh dude, the very first theme song to Bleach, Asterisk by Orange Range, dude, that was a bop back in the day. It's just such an overflowing impact that this series had when it first came out. Like, it was one of my all-time favorites. And then you got to the Soul Society arc, where everyone had to infiltrate the Soul Society to eventually save Rukia. Because it's just like, apparently she's being put to death, and it's just like, why? Why would they put her to death for this? Is it really that extreme? Everything felt so blown out of proportion, and you had the creepy Genichimaru, and it's just like, okay, what's this guy's deal? He feels sinister by comparison to everything else. And man, Kukakushiba, when she was introduced, oh, I had the biggest crush on her. I really kind of wish she had gone, but we got Ganju, and he was okay for the most part. But also hearing about how apparently Rukia had resulted in the death of Kai and Shiba and the mystery around that. So it's just like, oh man, Rukia has some, sad past and all that. And then the murder of Sosuke Aizen, it's just like, what's going on? Like, so much stuff is just happening because there's just this conspiracy going on in the Serete, and it's just like, what's happening? What's going on here? Who's going around killing people? It's just like, oh, it has to begin. It has to begin Ichimaru. Dude's creepy as all fuck. And not just that. Oh, the clash between Kenpachi Zaraki and Ichigo was so intense. It was so intense to actually find, like, just how much power someone could really wield and all this. But Ichigo doesn't have enough power, so we have to train him with Bankai. And it's just like, what is Bankai? And it's just like, dude, you about to learn what the fuck Bankai is, because Mayura, oh my, what a creep, and Uryu and Mayura's battle was so far out there. I loved it, and the thought that it's just like, oh, he loses his power because of that, I'm like, no, don't lose your power, Uryu, it's so cool. Toshiro Hetsugaya was awesome, and Rangiku, and Komamura, and Tosen. It's just like, I really just loved all the captains. A lot of them felt so cool. Like Kyoraku and Ukitaka. I was so ready to just learn so much about them. And when Kenpachi decides to help out Ichigo and the rest of the gang, and you get this fight between Kenpachi and Tosen, it's just like, what? I really did feel bad for Chad, because it's just like, he gets one win and is immediately taken out by Kyoraku. But I'm just like, okay, but Chad's gonna get better over time, right? And Orihime, she's not just gonna be relegated to healing only, right? Okay. Ichigo rescuing Rukia was still pretty cool. And the fight between Ichigo and Byakuya and their Bankai's clashing, oh man, what a visual feast for the eyes, whether you were reading it or watching it. It's an amazing clash and a fight, and the threat of Genryosai Yamamoto. Like, man, I was ready to see what would happen when he threw down, and Soi Feng also became one of my favorites with her interaction with Yoroichi, and just that relationship. Oh, I needed more of that in my life. The friggin' Shunko techniques, and oh man, that was amazing. I was so ready to see more Yoroichi fights. And then you get that mic drop of, it's just like, you thought that it was some mysterious guy like Genichimaru causing all this havoc, but it was really me, Sosuke Aizen. It's just like, what? How the fuck? Like, seriously, talk about some shit that really blew my mind. And then Ichigo goes in to take down Aizen after all of that, and Aizen takes him down with one finger, and it's just like, yo, after all the effort Ichigo put in to get as good as Byakuya, there was somebody else stronger and no one knew? Like, fuck me, man. And him just having the command of all those Menos Grande, like, no. Ah, dude, just so intense. I mean, they managed to save Rukia, but it just giving me heart palpitations just thinking about it. But when it came to the Bleach anime, it started to kind of get marred in filler after a certain point. And honestly, the Bound arc, when it started, wasn't that bad. It was an okay filler. especially because, gave Kon a little bit more to do, the mod soul. We introduced to other mod souls and all that, which I didn't mind them. It's just that after a certain point, they just kind of poof from the series. And it's just like, and the whole bounce situation just went a lot longer than I would have cared for. Like, it just kept going. Like, past when I thought it was going to end. I was like, okay, I mean, I guess you need a little bit more time. But then we got to the Arrancar and their arrival and the transfer student Shinji Harako and what the whole situation was with him and the fact that visors exist, people who Shinigami who have gained hollow powers being out there. It's just like, what? There's more people like Ichigo? What? It's not a new concept? So it's just like, so Ichigo has to kind of team up with them, and you have a transformed Grand Fisher come back. Like, oh my god, the fucker who killed Ichigo's mom. But then you have the mystery behind Ishin, and apparently he's also a Shinigami? Like, what? Like, so many mysteries just built up, and then you have the arrival of Yami and Ukiura. Like, motherfuckers coming in like it's the Saiyan Saga, Nappa and Vegeta, rolling up and just beating the shit out of Chad and Orihime and Ichigo, and it's an utter baby shake. And because of the invasion of the Arrancar and it being obviously a situation involving Aizen, the Soul Society, Sensen Renji, Toshiro, Rangiku, Ikaku, Yamachika, Rukia, like, it's a who's who of awesome guys. And then there's a second attack by my man, Grimjow Jaggerjax, or Jaggerjackis? However you want to say that name. And his squad roll up. We have this knockdown, drag out fight. And it's just like, all these Shinigami, we've actually had limiters on. And just remove their limiters and just decimate Grimjow's crew. But Ichigo himself gets decimated by Grimjow himself. But apparently Grimjow wasn't supposed to be there. He violated orders. And then he's dragged back to Hueco Mundo. So Ichigo has no choice but to train with the visors and become more powerful and all that. Ichigo has to deal with his inner Hollow. And man, Hollow Ichigo was the shit back in the day. Like, yes! Hollow Ichigo showing up was so cool. I loved it when he would take the Zanpakuto by the cloth or chain or whatever and just swing it around and use it to attack and all that. I'm just like, Ichigo, why aren't you using that out of the box thinking? Chad was training with Renji, so I thought he would become more powerful. Uryu was going to get his Quincy powers back. And the fact that, Aizen was trying to create this thing called the Oken and overthrow the Soul King, and it's just like, oh my god, it's a rebellion! I thought eventually we were going to find out more about Orihime's abilities, and then we have the infiltration of Hueco Mundo, because Orihime is abducted, because Ukiura is just like, hey, come with us, or all of your friends will die. We've been kicking their ass 6 ways from Sunday. You can't stop us, motherfucker. And Orihime is just like, oh, boo-hoo-hoo, I have to go. And I thought there was going to be more of a development with her relationship with Ichigo after all this, but And you have another attack from Yami, Lippi, Grimjow, Wonder Rice. And after the battle is all said and done, Yamamoto's like, Ichigo, I forbid you from going to rescue her. We will deal with all of this. Of course they don't obey any of that shit. It's just like, dude, how the fuck do you think we met? You think we're actually gonna listen to this crap? Come on. So of course, using Ukiura and his shady bullshit, we have an infiltration team, yet again, led with Chad, Uryu, Ichigo. But interestingly enough, we also have the addition of Rukio and Renji. Because it's just like, come on guys, one good infiltration deserves another. You helped us out that one time, so we'll help you out this time. It's almost kind of like we're repeating the same plot for some reason, but it's still kind of cool, so everyone's just gonna go with it for a while. We also have the introduction of Nell and the 3 Hollow she cruise with. You know, it was some cool shit for the most part. We also get introduced to what is known as the Privieron? Privieron? I think that's how you pronounce it. Privieron Espada. Dorondai. Or Dorondoni? Dorondoni. Man, these names are hard to pronounce. So Ichigo has a clash with that guy. Uryu gets in a fight with Cersei Sanderreich, which I always love her name because it's just like, sandwich? And he shows off his new abilities. Rukia actually gets into a fight with one of the actual Espada, though he's the weakest, but even still. Espada number 9, Aranera Arareri. And his creepy ass and the just cayenne shit comes up all over again, but it's kind of cool and just... It was a cool battle. I actually liked that battle for the most part. You also get a nice fight with Chad against Gatanbiani? I think that's how you say his name. Dude with the orange afro. And that was amazing. And, you know, he even breaks out a new arm transformation. And just, come on. So cool. You know, the attack and defense abilities were actually pretty cool. But then he gets jobbed by Noicha Gilga, who just arrives on the scene and just takes Chad down in a single attack, and I'm just like, damn it, Chad! Man, dude cannot just get a cool moment! And Renji ends up in a battle against Sayaporo Granz, and Uryu ends up being involved with it as well, and that becomes a whole thing. We also get into a brief fight between Ichigo and Ulquiorra, but Ichigo is just no match for him, and then it's also revealed that Ulquiorra is only number 4, and it's just like, wait, there are people stronger than this motherfucker? And then Ichigo just gets decimated. But Grimmjow decides to go rogue and has Orihime heal up Ichigo so that Grimmjow can have a fight with him, because it's just like, hey, Grimmjow is the rival now, and he wants to fight him some Ichigo. And Grimmjow uses some bullshit to trap Ulquiorra in another dimension or whatever, but the fight between Ichigo and Grimmjow, just, ooh, yes, it's so delicious, it's so delicious, yum 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 yum, delicioso. It's a fantastic knockdown, drag out, motherfucking fight, but Ichigo manages to come out on top, and everything seems all well and good. But then the anime goes into another filler, and it's a filler I really didn't care too much about. Like, new captain something or other. It wasn't the worst, it wasn't the best. I just don't remember too much about it. It was brief enough that I instantly forgot it. But then you got back to more of Arrancar versus Shinigami, as Noicha Gilga enters into the fray, manages to beat the ever-living shit out of Ichigo. But then we find out Nell is actually a former Arrancar, and used to also have a very high position within the Arrancar as well. Neutra had some kind of grudge against her, so he took her down. Apparently because she was a female, which, dude, come on. But she beats the shit out of Neutra. But unfortunately she can't maintain her adult form for long enough, which is sad. I'm just like, no, I wanted to see her kick his ass. But then in comes Kenpachi Zaraki, and ooh, the fight between Neutra and Kenpachi is oof. Mwah, chef kiss, stuff of legends. Retsu Unohana also gets a brief situation with some weird Arrancar dudes. I don't remember that all too well, honestly. And also the fight between Byakuya and Zomari, I think his name was, the one black dude. on the Arankar. And that fight, that I did not care for that fight. It was a baby shake. That was a baby shake. But Mayura versus Sailaparo. No, yes. Creepy scientist against creepy scientist? Yes, please. Give it to me. It is weird. And that whole fight was just wild and out. But then Coyote Stark, I still find that name hilarious, Coyote Stark. He's the number one Arankar too. And he captures Orihime, brings her back to Aizen. And Aizen just like, I'm going, all you guys are here, I'm gonna leave for the human world and destroy your Karakura town. Okay, peace, bye-bye. We also get this brief storyline that goes on in the past, which tells of how all of the Vizords basically became Vizords. A lot of them were actually high-ranking members of the Gote 13, the 13 Court Guard squads, experimented on by Aizen, turned into Vizords. Everything that happened to them was ended up being blamed on Ukiura, who was also a captain. Like, the connections to the 13 Court Guard squads and Aizen and all this, it's just like, it's weirdly intricate. Kind of makes you feel like all of this is being pulled out of someone's ass, but I mean, it's still fun enough. At this point, everything's still fun and dandy. So that was a thing. But then you get the battle in Karakura, where you get the forces of Sosuke Aizen's army of Arankar versus the Soul Society and their Shinigami. But it's mostly fights with lieutenants. Hisagi gets a fight. Ikkaku gets a fight. Suifeng and Amaida get a kind of minor bit of a fight. Tia Halebe's Fracciones have a 3 versus 1 with Rangiku, which that got kind of intense, but a lot of it is just kind of feels like, man, shouldn't the captains be helping out for the most part? Like, a lot of the lieutenants kind of get a bit of few scrapes for the most part. But then the anime goes into the Zanpakuto Beast arc thing, which wouldn't be so bad. I actually kind of love the concept of anthropomorphic versions of the Zanpakutos kind of running amok. The downside was that we didn't really know enough about a lot of the Zanpakutos to have too much going on with their humanoid forms. Now, I really did love a lot of them, like Kyoraku's Kanten Kyokatsu. I actually loved that one. Let it never be said that I would not fuck a sword. That one especially stands out to me because it actually ended up being adapted into the manga, which freaked me the holy hell out, because it's just like, wait a minute. But man, that was some busty sword. Also Hanako, everybody loves a cat girl. If you don't, you wrong. Oddly enough, Kenpachi's sword never seems to manifest. I wonder why. Also, Zabimaru. There was a joke in the manga about Zabimaru's spirit form being altered or something. And all I can say is well done to the animation staff for actually doing something with that. Very, very impressive. But it mostly just serves, the whole story arc serves as one big, kind of fun what if. A lot of people don't care for it, but I actually kind of had fun with it for the most part. But then you get back to the fights. But the problem with the anime at this point had become that so often the whole situation in Karakura Town, or basically just overall, the clashes between the Soul Reapers or Shinigami versus the Arankar, it just kind of keeps getting interrupted. And honestly, the thought that people kind of lost patience, yeah, I really understand that. Bleach does not lend itself well to filler. Like, in terms of series that lend itself well to filler, not Bleach, because it only has so many pauses in between where you could actually stop. With Naruto, there are a few moments where you could get some filler in. Although, considering the length of some of the filler arcs they go through, with One Piece lends itself perfectly to filler. Like, any adventure can happen anywhere because they're on the high sea. Bleach, I really do feel like a lot of the filler hurt it over time. But again, you got some fun moments. Ichigo versing Ulquiorra once again. Ichigo unleashing the power of his true kind of hollow form. That got really intense. Hetsugaya versus Tia Haribel was kind of cool. Captain Kyokatsu versus Coyote Stark, pretty cool. Soifeng and her Bankai was really just wild. And her verse facing off against Barigan and how that went down was actually pretty cool. Like, a lot of my friends talked about that for a while. Asagi facing off against Tosen coming to play, that was also pretty awesome. And then for some reason, Byakuya and Kenpachi got into a fight that got interrupted by Yami, and the stuff that came out about Yami. Yeah, and it was around this point that it's just like, and you are losing me. Because then Aizen starts pulling some stuff, and it's just like, my power of know you! It's just like, you think you're doing this thing to me, but you're actually doing it to someone else. It kind of started getting a little old. Again, Ryu's side gets sealed away because of Yuppie, or whatever his name was. Ichigo eventually managed to get to the actual battlegrounds and tries to help out, but everybody else keeps getting caught up in the illusions of Aizen. Ulquiorra arrives on the scene to help out too. Again, we find out he was never even evil to begin with. He was actually doing it all for Rangiku, and I also kind of feel that was a little bit muddied in its execution. And then Ichigo's dad shows up, and it's just like, I'm going to teach you the final Getsuga Tensho. And it's just like, no, wait, stop. I need you to explain a whole bunch there. And then Ichigo just kind of gains this new power and defeats Aizen in like one shot. And it was just like, okay, Kubo, dude, like, did you lose interest in this? Like, come on, man. Like, it was around this time that, honestly, the writing really took a nosedive. Because it's just like, it was around the end of the fight between Ichigo and Ulquiorra. Because that fight was amazing. It was a really cool fight. And the way that Ulquiorra went down, just heartbreaking to a certain degree. But the rest of everything is just kind of like, what else were you planning here, man? And then the anime goes into yet another filler, which I really didn't care about. And then you get into the Lost Substitute Shinigami arc, which was all about the Fullbringers and their involvement, trying to get Ichigo's powers back. You're introduced to Kugo Ginjo, who seemed alright, but, Ichigo had given up his powers to defeat Aizen, and honestly, I thought the series was going to end when he lost his powers. And then we're introduced to what seems to be the villain, Tsukishima, who had killed a substitute, and he's also a Fullbringer, so it's just like, okay, the Fullbringers apparently seem to be fairly powerful. Ginjo seems cool enough, and the whole crew of Execution also seemed cool enough, but then you find out that Ginjo was actually playing Ichigo the entire time, and it was all a trick, and, he had actually was being deceived in a lot of ways, but he does eventually get his powers back because of the help of Ruki and the rest of the Gote 13, and they come in to take on Execution, but the problem is, these are actual humans, so a good chunk of them, it's a baby shake. The only one who has any form of a struggle is Ichigo, because Ginjo took Ichigo's initial powers in order to awaken his own. But even that is just like, Ichigo straight kills a man. Like, forget a lot of the other people Ichigo fought. They were soul people. Like, Ichigo killed a living person. I don't know, I always felt weird about all that. And then the whole situation with Execution comes to an end, and, like, a lot of the fights were not great. Like, not great. And the Bleach anime kind of goes out on a bit of a whimper. But the manga continued on for the most part. You cap things off with the 1,000-year blood war and all that, with the involvement of the Quincy coming back, who want to kind of, gain their revenge and take their rightful place at the top, led by this dude Yoach. And I thought at first it was kind of cool, got the Wonderneck and They invade Hueco Mundo, trying to take down Halibel, who had become kind of the ruler of Hueco Mundo along with Nell. You get to see a little bit more of Nell. But the problem with all of the Thousand Year Blood War is that nothing lasts as long as I would hope, and a lot of the defeats of a lot of the enemies just kind of happen. So the Soul Society comes under siege from the Wundenrick. A lot of them end up getting their Bankai stolen, which was a thing, but I don't think we ever really find out how that all worked, or if it was ever used against them in a meaningful way. Like, honestly, the conclusion to a lot of this, I was burnt out. I was burnt out on most of what was going on at this point. Yamamoto ends up, being taken out after a certain point, so Kyoraku ends up rising to captain, or commander. We find out some stuff about Retsu Unohana, and, spoilers if you got this far, like, all this happened almost it's been over 5 years, come on. We find out Unohana was actually the original Kenpachi, what I thought was sick, but then she ends up getting killed in order to awaken Kenpachi's abilities and all that. I'm just like, no, don't kill her. You finally do something with her and you kill her. And that really does become my gripe with a lot of what happens in the Thousand Year Blood War. Is like, you will frequently hear me say, you finally did something with someone and you killed them. We find out more about Masaki Kurosaki, Ichigo's mom, and apparently she was originally a Quincy, and Ichigo also has Quincy powers, and I'm just like, but no, do not add Quincy powers on top of everything else. It's an interesting enough direction, but it's just like, no, I don't want this. I mean, I'm glad they gave Masaki more to work with and gave her more of a personality aside from Mom who died. But at the same time, I'm just like, Ichigo is basically every power in the series. He's a Shinigami, he's a Visored, he has hollow powers, because he straight up transforms into a full-on hollow in a few places, to the degree that you could basically call him an Arankar, and now he's a Fullbringer, and now you're telling me, oh, whoops, he's a Quincy too, and I'm just like, oh, God. You find some stuff about Zangetsu that's very alarming. Some things we knew about Zangetsu we never knew about Zangetsu, and honestly, that thing I feel like I need to be re-explained to me to a certain degree. Komamura has this cool fight, but again, what happens with Komamura is just kind of sad. We get to see some cool stuff from Kenpachi now that he's fully kind of awakened his abilities, and then we also learned something else that's kind of troubling about Yachiru, and it's just like, ugh. The elite group of Quincy's called the Sternritter are just causing a whole bunch of shit. Some weird stuff happens to Hitsugaya, some weird stuff happens to Mayuri. At some point we lose Nemu, and it's really kind of sad. We're introduced to something called the Zero Squad, who are the Royal Palace Defenders, because everyone's going after the Soul King. And the situation with the Soul King is weird, but eventually the Soul King does end up dying at the hands of Hiwatch. I always want to call him Hashwald. It's Hiwatch, I think. That's how you pronounce his name. And it gets so bad that they even have to bring in Aizen. Uryu had joined the enemy forces, but he was just simply trying to take them down from the inside. That feels like it doesn't go as far as it could have. We learned some stuff about Nanao that, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, feels kind of pointless too. We finally see what Urahara's Bankai can actually do, and it was a thing. Honestly, a lot of the Bankais and abilities that are revealed towards the end of the series just get so crazy and out there. And honestly, just like with the Aizen situation, the whole battle against Yoach just kind of ends. Like, I remember reading up into the end, and once I got to the conclusion, it just kind of felt like everything just stops. And I'm just like, what? That's it? Really? And a lot of that is why I'm kind of waiting for the anime to come back, because I feel like maybe in animation, I'll understand things a little bit better. I'll care about a lot of things a little bit better, because getting to the end of Bleach, I was jaded. I was just kind of done. I was ready for it to be over. But at the same time, I wanted a satisfying conclusion to all of this, and never really got it. It was just a kind of bitter conclusion for me after this point. And I didn't want that to be the case with a series that had been so good up until this point. And I'm really hoping that the anime comes back and kind of alters a few things, help to alleviate some of my feelings, foreshadows certain things here and there. There's a novel called Can't Fear Your Own World that, it acts as a kind of after everything situation. We get a few answers to the in-betweens that happened before and a little bit after the conclusion, the final arc. And I want to see some of that adapted too, because it helps to flesh out certain characters that we really didn't get enough of towards the end of things. Like, seriously, anime staff, it's your turn, run with it, just flesh everything out. Because that was really the disappointing thing for me. You had all these wonderful characters that were introduced, we had so much time with, but it always felt like we never had enough time with. And it really did feel like Kubo had just gotten jaded with everything he had to do for Shonen Jump to that point. That he was just kind of done. And I really did think he was done. But it turned out he wasn't. That's when we got Burn the Witch. And my god, what a breath of fresh air this was. A new world with new characters, Noelle and Nini, who felt, interesting and fun. Female characters who were actually taking charge of everything going on around them, working in a place called Reverse London, basically the magical world, in a world populated by dragons who would sometimes attack, and with certain dragons, if you come into contact with them, you become known as Dragonclad, as you kind of attract dragons, and that happens to one guy who called Balgo. And Noelle and Nini work under this one guy, Billy Binks Jr., and, they work for this thing called Windbind Academy, and just, I love the world. I love the world that was crafted by Kubo with this. And basically, we end up finding out that, Wingbind is actually the West branch of the Soul Society. Now, I believe Kubo cleared up that it isn't just a one-to-one analog. Witches aren't actually Shinigami, dragons aren't the equivalent of hollows. It's a completely different thing, but everything over there kind of works differently. So it's almost as though each section of the world almost kind of has its own magic system or spiritual system or something like that. And honestly, I was just deeply enraptured with the story going on there. With their own Gote 13 being the called the Top of Horns, and they were pretty cool, especially friggin' Bruno Bangknife. Like, oh man, that name has so much edge to it. I loved it. Bruno Bangknife. Like, dude is such a Chad. And very much reminds me of Grimjow. Honestly, the council kind of tries to pull a thing with Rukia, same with the Serete pulled, by trying to take out Balgo, because it's just like, oh, he's dangerous, he's Dragonclad, we should just execute him and be done with it. It's some devious shit, but I kinda loved it. We also have Sullivan Squire, who's the director of the Sabers. Each part of the Wingbind has its own divisions and all that. Bruno is part of the Inks, or the Magic Circle Corp. They create spells by basically spray painting magic circles. I love the magic system here. And the Sabers that Sullivan Squire controls, they're called the Tactic Corps, and honestly, she kind of feels like Soifon, and I love Soifon, and I'm just like, oh man, she seems so cool. And we have Noelle and Nini, who are underneath the Pipers, run by basically what looks like a Santa Claus elf, run by this guy Trombone Tekani. But Billy Banks Jr., is their commanding officer, and the stuff they get into is pretty fun. It's such a fun series, and the animation that it got was so amazing. And their quest to exterminate dark dragons. So end up being introduced to another character who becomes a dragon-clad Macy Bluejair, who has this lovely crush on Ninny that I wholeheartedly endorse. And it's fun because, Macy has the crush on Ninny, and Balgo has a crush on Noelle, and it's all kind of cute. And I really want to go back to this world. It's just like, it is always the testament of a great creator when they can have such an amazing follow-up that just brings you into that world. And honestly, Burn the Witch, just set the world on fire when it came about, and it really did show that Kubo still had it. All of this, the world of Burn the Witch takes place 12 years after the events of the Quincy Blood War arc, Thousand Year Blood War arc, and 2 years after the events of the very final chapter of Bleach, where we find out that Ichigo got with Orihime, Rukia got with Renji. They had babies, not in a group, separately. Don't be weird. So it kind of makes me wonder if their kids will show up in the series at all. Like, the possibilities are so endless. And like that excitement for more Bleach content really shows that I never lost that love of Bleach. It still kind of resonates within me. I just wanted better for the series as a whole. And when I didn't get that, I just started to get kind of depressed about the series. But with the fact that Kubo has still been working on things for Bleach here and there, and the return of the anime, the potential that Burn the Witch has had left, right, and center, I'm just really ready to see more from the series. And I can't wait to see more from the series. And it feels so weird to say that, but full stop. I still love Bleach. I don't think I'll ever really stop loving Bleach. And I really just can't wait to see more. But if you've made it this far through all my rants and rambles, let me know, do you still like Bleach? Did you enjoy Burn the Witch? Did you kind of fall off of it after a certain point and think you might want to pick it back up at some point? Will you watch the 1,000 Year Blood War, or the Quincy Blood War, once it finally comes out? I thought it was coming out this year, but apparently that wasn't the case. But COVID and all that, so you never know. But I'm definitely interested to hear from you and what you think about all of this. And if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, bell, all that good stuff. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.